everybody. So we had a request to discuss the concept of grinding teeth. This is something that we are seeing more and more in practice, actually, which is quite interesting that the request came through as a topic discussion. So when we consider the aspects of grinding teeth, a lot of the time it is recognized from almost like a medical side for the positioning of the jaw, or the maxilla positioning or mandible positioning. Sometimes it can be connected to the concept of sinus. But essentially, at the end of the day, we need to understand what the emotional aspect or consciousness understanding is behind the actual process of grinding one's teeth. So when we look at grinding one's teeth, there's a couple of elements. So we look at the locking down of the jaw. We also look at the sliding of the teeth, so forwards and backwards, okay, which is very similar to mastication or chewing, the chewing mechanisms of the jaw. And then we look at the concept of gritting one's teeth, actually biting down and holding into the actual jaw muscle and the jaw mechanisms. So let's break it down. So we'll start with the concept of actually the locking down or the anchoring of the jaw space. Now, when we consider the jaw, we need to understand that there is a reciprocal point of the actual jaw muscle with the SIJ, which is the sacroiliac joint, meaning that anything that is happening in the pelvis is actually happening in the jaw as a reciprocal. Second, when we look at the grinding or the actual movement response of the teeth in relation to mastication or chewing, we understand that perhaps from an emotional perspective, one is mulling over something, chewing on one's cud, chewing or biting, or kind of like working with the same thing over and over and over, and not actually getting to the point where one can get to the point where it can swallow the experience or swallow the information, or digest the information, to be able to actually break that experience or information or situation down enough to swallow it and digest it. So remember, the digestive process starts in the mouth. So this goes from a consciousness understanding as well as an emotional understanding, being able to actually break things down to a point where it can reabsorb what is good for the body, mind, soul, and it can excrete and release what is not good or in service of the body, mind, soul, as an understanding of all complementary areas. So the grinding and the movement of those teeth is also when it is in that locked or compressed position. So that is where the actual grinding process becomes destructive for the teeth themselves, because you are going to have a weigh down response on the enamel, which also then leads us to a supportive diagnostic in the Chinese elements, that each teeth position has a complementary element to it. So say, for example, the molars, which are often very much the areas in the mouth or the teeth that are prone to cavity formation, they are part of the metal element. Now, the metal element is always related to my posters are falling off. Oh, I got such a fright. Sorry. So the molars are related to the metal elements. Metal elements goes hand in hand with mucus production, or the presence of mucus in the system. So often when we look at high cavity formation, we're actually not looking at what is being put on the teeth, but more what is happening inside the body from a lymphatic and mucus perspective. We have a very consistent common denominator when there are a lot of molar issues, cavities, or breakdown in the enamel. We often see very toxic lymphatic conditions in the person. So they've got high mucus storage in the system, they've got toxic lymph movement, and their body is basically in a high toxic environment. So just to understand the concept of mucus, which is very important here because it does play a role in that tension mechanism in the jaw, is that mucus is not limited, or the snot is not limited to the sinus. Mucus accumulatively over years of high sugar, dairy, and wheat intake can actually create storage pockets in the connective tissue. So this means that the connective tissue and the storage of these mucus accumulations will be throughout the body. It is not limited to the sinus cavities. It can actually sit anywhere in that connective tissue in the physical body. Now, if you even just think of the composition of mucus or of snot, like if you had to blow your nose, if you think of it as its composition, it is slimy, it is thick, and it is non-permeable. So in terms of what that will do when it's stuck in the actual connective tissue, you're looking at a slimy, non-permeable environment. Now, if you have a high mucus level in the connective tissue and in the body, your cells are not going to be able to absorb nutrition, hydration, and the nutrients provided from the lymphatic system and the blood. But as well, it is not going to be able to release any toxins that have actually built up inside the cell. So you get a low grade, over time, you'll get a low grade cellular toxicity response, which can often then actually create a virus, because remember, viruses you don't catch from the environment. It is something that the body naturally and innately makes when they are very high toxin levels. So if you are wanting to avoid viral infections, watch what the internal aspect of your body is doing. Monitor, and if you can, try and reduce or even limit the intake of sugar, wheat, and dairy as much as you can. You'll see a dramatic improvement of the breakdown of the mucus that is already in the system. And these can be mucus deposits that have actually been there since childhood. It's not something that just quickly gets created. When you go on a sugar, dairy, and wheat-free diet, within 2 to 3 months, you will be smelling things differently. You'll be tasting things differently. The weight will start to release from the body because the body is no longer toxic. So it can actually work with the processing and regulation of the natural sugars in the system. If you have very high sugar intakes and also wheat intakes, you've got a very high inflammatory condition. It's a natural inflammatory response. Sugar, just quickly touching on that, actually creates neural burning. So if you have a very high overstimulated child, or even if you are very easily stimulated through sensory exposure and you have sugar in your diet, you are going to have a heightened experience of whatever sensory exposure you are connected to. So if you are very hyperactive, if you are very sensory sensitive, limit that sugar and even take it out completely if you can. It makes a huge difference. Wheat is naturally a response from the body in terms of inflammation. So anything that comes in terms of gluten and wheat, the body naturally inflames. Now, if you have a neural compromise in terms of sugar exposure and the neural burning and heightened neurological sensitivity, but from a negative perspective, and then you have a heightened inflammatory environment from the wheat, you're going to have degradation of the system, which means that the system essentially is in a destructive phase as opposed to a support of repair and regeneration. So increased fatigue levels, you will have increased and accelerated aging responses in terms of hair, skin, body, etc. And then you are going to have a slower healing response, which means that if you are in any athletic performance, you will have a slower healing response. And as you get older, that will become even more so. So they really do contribute to the concept of grinding teeth, actually, without us even being aware of that exposure. Now, when we look at the concept of grinding teeth, another major part in terms of the relationship between the jaw and the pelvis is the actual digestive component. We have the small intestine meridian that influences through the jaw. We have our large intestine that influences through the jaw, and those are intestinal spaces close and near to the pelvis. Now, when we get a locking of the jaw, it can, depending on how that body is actually experiencing the locking mechanisms, it can be as a result of the reciprocal of the pelvis, or the pelvis can be in a locked mechanism as a response to the locking of the jaw. So that is always different in terms of every client that we work with. It's not something that we have as a consistent. It depends on how that body is actually emotionally and physically responding to its experiences in terms of how it actually structures that locking mechanism. So when we look at a locked pelvis, remember, there are different contributions to why that pelvis can actually lock in the first place. You can have a lack of safety because of that reproductive area, specifically in females. If they're not feeling safe, their pelvis will lock up, and it can actually affect the gait of that pelvis, meaning how the rotational mechanisms run and respond to movement. And then also you get what we call a postural locking, which is a temporary fascial jamming in those pelvic regions that are not specific to long-term maintenance of a locked pelvis, but if that environmental conflict or demand or situation or event is not resolved and the person stays in an expression of perceiving their environment as unsafe and that they feel insecure, that temporary postural locking can actually become a permanent fascial jamming. Okay, so when we look at the pelvis, even just from a temporal postural locking, that reciprocation will influence the pelvic basin, which influences the cranial basin at the back of the head. You've got the pelvic diaphragm, which if you've got the pelvis, it runs in terms of the front of the pelvis. Let's get this guy, then we can actually show you. So with the pelvic diaphragm that sits over here, this will come into lock. And in the SIJ and the bones at the back of the pelvis, you can actually get a tensegrity jamming coming down through the sacrum and locking into that coccyx. So the coccyx actually goes into a fear response, like how a dog would tuck its tail underneath. The coccyx actually tucks its tail underneath, and it affects its natural lumbar curvature. So you've got the sacrum, which comes as an outward curvature into the lumbar spine that comes into an inward curvature. Now, if you've got pulling onto that actual coccyx, what happens in terms of that lumbar curvature is that lumbar spine actually goes straight, which means if you have a straightening here and then you have the thoracic curvature, you'll actually fall backwards. So what happens is that you get a shortening through the torso space to allow a postural gravitational repositioning. So you'll get something like the coccyx tucking under like that. So you'll see you'll actually fall backwards. So the body tends to pull forward. Now, if you have a look even at where I'm putting pressure onto the body, this goes primarily through navel, lower pelvic region. It creates a lot of shortening through the central fascial zonings and abdominal spaces. So it often creates a psoas contraction, which means that the connection of the psoas into the pelvis and the rib cage is actually adjusted, which creates a shortening in terms of the respiratory reflex at the back. And then when you've got this positioning, I wonder if I can actually get him into there again. So if you've got this positioning, then the top half of the body is leaning forward. So the eye line in a natural position would be staring at the floor. So what happens is that the head lifts to be able to lift that eye line, and you get a cervical compression. So you actually get impingement over that cervical area, which often runs in cervical vertebra 2 and 3, which is actually part of the respiratory reflex. So if you get a contraction or a fascial engagement to maintain a postural position in those cervical vertebrae, you are going to get a response into the respiratory reflex, which means that the natural respiratory reflex goes tight. Your bronchioles, your diaphragm, the intrinsic muscles of the rib cage are not being able to expand and contract correctly. And then that creates a tightening into the respiratory reflex or the chest space, which you have another diaphragm here. So then this one contracts. The shoulders have to round forward because it pulls everything forward. You then get even more of a rounding position over the thoracic. You need to adjust the eye line, so you get more of a connection into that cervical spine, and it creates like a vicious circle effect. So you get a diaphragm locking on the thoracic gate, you get a diaphragm locking on the primary diaphragm, and you get a locking onto the pelvic diaphragm, which means that this guy goes into even more contraction, which then creates even more contraction into the jaw, which creates even more contraction in terms of the gritting or the anchorage of that space. Now, a very easy way to see how your jaw is positioned is through the teeth. Okay, this is, once you become aware of this, it's actually quite freaky how the pelvis moves so regularly. The teeth should fit in a very comfortable position. So if you put your molar teeth together, you should have a very gentle gap between the front teeth and the bottom teeth. So they're aware of each other, but they're not actually touching. Whenever you have a pelvic placement movement, this will often change. So when you put the molars together, sometimes they can actually lie directly on top of one another. Sometimes they can push against one another. And you can actually feel, oh, my teeth feel very different today. They're not actually in their same position. That means that the pelvis has moved. Okay, so sometimes the pelvis will actually reposition, and you can pick up the pelvic repositioning through the positioning of the teeth, which sometimes the jaw then goes into a space of feeling that it is out of place. So it then responds with a postural temporary locking to help position that jaw so that you can chew and you can eat without actually impacting the front teeth. So it's amazing how this whole body actually starts to create its story. All right, so there are many contributing factors to a locking jaw. Often as children, when the children do not debrief correctly, or they are too neurologically overstimulated in terms of exposure to light, and in our current time, screen time, they haven't had good biokinesthetic regulation through the day, meaning jumping in trees, playing in the garden, kicking a ball, falling over. Their body, from a sensory perspective, is in complete overwhelm. So what they do is during the sleep space, they will then process any aspect of information that they haven't had time or the ability to process during their wake state during the day. So they start to chew through that information. So it is a very common thing for young children to grind or bite their teeth during their sleep space. It's often just almost like a consciousness chewing or biting through the information pieces that they need to process in their subconscious sleep space that they didn't have time or the ability to process in their wake state. But if that process of regulation is not managed and they're not supported in terms of learning how to regulate their day space, often then it becomes a sensory overwhelm and a lack of safety, and then they hold their teeth in terms of like biting in anticipation. So from a consciousness perspective as well, grinding teeth also goes into the understanding of the concepts of biting one's tongue, keeping your mouth shut. So if you as a child were kind of like taught it's better to see you, not to hear you, you're actually subliminally guided to keep your mouth shut. Now, it's not natural for a mouth to stay shut. We're natural talkers, we're eaters, breathing in and out of through the mouth space. So the mouth is actually designed to be able to open and close on a regular experience. So if we're taught from a young age to hold your tongue or keep your mouth closed, on a subconscious level, you've actually got that training into that jaw muscle to be quiet. It's better to be quiet because it keeps the peace, it doesn't create conflict, keeps everybody happy. Okay, but everybody else is happy because you're quiet, but you're not happy because you've got jaw problems. So the jaw also goes into the emotional contribution of unexpressed anger. So unexpressed anger very commonly shows up in there when it goes into the ear, where there's a lot of ear tension, or even the experience of tinnitus, not as a diagnostic, but as a sound awareness. When the jaw locks and it goes into there, it is often also related to the emotional capacity of unexpressed anger. It's just, it can't hear anymore. So it creates like a ringing sound to actually block out that auditory reflex, and then it gives the body almost like a little bit of a sensory dulling or filtration so that it doesn't have extra things to deal with because it already has all of this. All right. In terms of life experiences, if you're in a career or a relationship or an environment whereby you just cannot digest your experiences, it's an environment that you feel is quite toxic or in harm to you, then the jaw can also lock from that because it becomes an undigestible morsel of experience. So it is something that is distasteful. You don't want to put it in your mouth. You don't want to chew on it, you don't want to swallow it, it's like distasteful. So those aspects from an emotional capacity will also bring in a large complement to the idea of that locking of the jaw. The jaw space also relates into what we call the 8 original cells. 8 original cells are the 8 original cells from which we then mitotically divide into a form and shape, and it is pretty much the same in all mammals. So the actual original development looks the same, and then it gets to a point where that one will become a dolphin or we will become a human, but the actual process of development looks almost identical. So the 8 original cells go into the concept of our origination, the original development of us, and how that is expressed, how that is experienced, and where the value is of that origination of our soul space in terms of our life interaction and experience. So a locking jaw, a grinding teeth is not as simple as they make it out to be. There are preventative measures in terms of, or supportive measures in terms of having like a bite guard, but really if you're not able to actually access the origination or the source of the grinding, then very often it's actually going to be something that will just continue. So you can still have the support from an actual like bite plate, but it's not necessarily something that will change the condition. So when we work with it from a fascia response and integration, often these muscles and the jaw mechanisms, you've got joint impingement, you've got joint inflammation, you've got muscular contraction, and you've got overuse of that area. So you've almost got like a weigh down effect on that space. We work with it from a fascia response and integration energy medicine application, whereby we're actually able to help the periosteal lining of those bones to relax and de-stress so that the bones themselves can actually work with a nutritional absorption. But also from a muscular perspective, the body is in a self-protective mechanism. It's biting its teeth, holding on for dear life, too afraid to let go. It's almost like you've bitten onto this thing now and you just don't know how to let go. So when we work it from a fascial response and integration perspective, we can often work into the resetting of those muscular fibers, and you have a stability mechanism that runs in the jaw space. So we're able to actually relax into that full mechanism of the jaw and the teeth. We can work into the gum space. We can work in terms of how those teeth are positioned into the gums as well. And very importantly, we can actually work into the trigeminal nerve, which runs along the side of the face. It does connect into influence of the vagus nerve as well. And when those nerve spaces are in stress, the brain actually goes into a tissue contraction. The cranial bones go into a contraction response. So they're actual natural vibrational suturing lines, almost like how where the different cranial bones are positioned. In that actual joint line, you've got a very, very subtle vibration that happens to keep those skull bones moving. So they have to move. That cranium has to be able to expand. It has to be able to contract. The brain tissue has to be able to expand. It has to be able to contract. So when you've got a lot of neurological compression or influence from that tight jaw space, you're going to have a lot of neurofascia compression. Now, the actual neurofascia compression can affect into the eyes, so they can actually affect the eyesight. So sometimes eyesight, when we work with that as an actual treatment focus with the fascia, it is often just a tissue tension on the actual eyeball itself, because remember, that's just soft tissue. And then that optic nerve that comes through is actually being compressed. So its ability to receive information translated in how it works with the rods and the cones will be affected. So working with the fascia, it's very gentle. So we can actually help those eye spaces to de-stress. We can help the neural lines to de-stress. And then remember, with fascia, it's a ripple effect. So any work that we do on that actual direct symptomatic expression will help to translate that release and adjustment right throughout the system. So even just by working on the jaw and the cranial positioning, you can benefit and improve the pelvic positioning and response and circulatory deposits down there. You can work on the resetting of the cranium and the circulatory deposits there. And then also remember, with that small intestine, large intestine, meridial influence on the face, you can then improve how that intestinal focus actually manages its experience. From a consciousness perspective, remember that the small intestine is a brain. It is one of the brains in the body. We have our heart brain, our small intestine brain, and our action brain. Heart brain is the primary brain of the system. It governs everything. It instructs everything. It actually tells the brain what to do. And then through positive neural feedback, the brain tells the body what to do. Negative feedback, the body then sends messages back to the brain. So we need to have all those systems in a healthy, regulated mechanism or communication sequencing. So when we've got a interruption in terms of the idea of grinding teeth and a locked jaw space, you have neural interference here, which means that the ripple effect is disrupted. So if you put a stone into a lake and it creates that beautiful effect, and then you throw another stone there, and then that's got a ripple effect. This is kind of like the idea or a visual aspect of how a locked jaw or grinding teeth can actually affect the quality of your digestive system. A locked jaw or grinding teeth can actually be linked into constipation. And constipation is not always the expression whereby the fecal matter cannot be released from a normal defecation process. It can actually be higher up in the intestinal space, which can present as almost like diarrhea or irregular runny stool or bowel movements, whereby sometimes it's very loose, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's very loose. So that can actually be a constipated expression higher up in that intestinal space. Constipation is not always just the inability to release any fecal or bowel matter. So there's many different aspects that go in there. You need to remember that when we go into fight-flight responses, we automatically create a vascular contraction in the intestinal space to create a propulsion of blood circulation into our lateral extremities, meaning it pushes all the blood into the outside of the body, your limbs, because you need to get yourself out of that situation. But because we are so familiar with fight-flight responses now, our bodies are incredibly intelligent. So they create a adaptation model for that fight-flight response, meaning that fight-flight response then suddenly becomes normal. And that inflammatory or temporary postural locking becomes normal. So then the body no longer has that temporary postural locking as a reference of safety. It needs to create a new reference of safety, which means it creates a secondary layer of temporary postural locking over the original postural locking. So now that original postural locking becomes almost temporary, more long term, and then the new one is your temporary. But then this one adapts and becomes the norm. Then you get the new layer, which creates a temporal postural locking. Now, if you just imagine as an exaggerated state, all those layers of temporary postural locking, you are going to have postural influences. Bones will always move in the direction of least resistance. So if you have temporal postural locking on the spine, the shoulders, the pelvis, knees, toes, anywhere, even on the jaw, because we're discussing jaw and grinding teeth today, any postural locking or any excessive fascial connection or muscular contraction is going to deviate the bone into that direction, because the bone will not resist the contraction. It will move with it because it is the direction of least resistance. Here is resistance. Here is no resistance. So if it pushes, it will push the bone that side. If it contracts, it will go with it. So it's got a really intricate relationship. Your muscle, tendon, ligament system is more the superficial expression of the superficial fascia. So when we go into those spaces from a fascial response and integration system, we can work with it from a superficial perspective, but without manipulation. This locking of the jaw and jaw tension and teeth grinding is a lack of safety. It is an expression whereby you feel you cannot say what needs to be said. You cannot chew through what it is you need to chew through. You cannot fully swallow and process an experience. It is stuck. It creates a sense of stagnation. Now you want to go in there with forced manual manipulation, creating even more invasive experience for the body. The body will respond beautifully in terms of the forced manipulation for a day or 2 days, but then it will reset. So it's not that it's not a system of treatment that can be valuable, but you need to understand what the original creation and source of emotion or feeling space that actually created that in the first place. So if you're going to introduce the same environment as what caused that symptom to begin with, you will force a certain outcome, but then the body will automatically run a healing loop and cycle back to the original creation. So it will have a temporary resolution, but often that temporary resolution as well, what we need to consider is that it's actually linked into an adrenal spike. So the body panics, it creates adrenaline to help get everything moving to help you get out of that situation. Meanwhile, you're just lying having a mandible or a manual release done. So the body's full of adrenaline for the next couple of hours and day or 2 days, because it will have a residue effect. But then once that has worn off, your body actually has to go into a healing process to undo the inflammatory responses from that adrenaline spike. So now you have the adrenaline spike, you have the residue of that, you have higher cortisol levels because of the stress. You've got the vascular contraction because it's perceiving it as a fight-flight response. So you've got all these other biological mechanisms that you need to now focus on regulating, and then you've got the jaw back into its position. So working with something like this from an energy medicine perspective can be very valuable because it is non-invasive, it is safe and nurturing, and you can actually use the system or the protocol of the method of fascia response and integration system to source the origination or the source of that condition to begin with. And then obviously with an energy medicine perspective, working with the energetics of the body, you can repair the electron cycles in the system, you can repair the electronics of the system, being the nerve responses. There's so much neural fascia in that headspace that it actually becomes more a neural condition that we work with as opposed to a muscular condition that we work with. So loads of information today. This turned out to be a little bit of a longer post than what I was anticipating, but so much information goes into this, and there is still so much more information to go into this. When we look at the concepts of the joint systems, which the jaw mechanism is all a part of, that goes into a whole different consciousness, awareness, and meaning and contribution, which can open up a whole different conversation. So what we've worked with today has been very simple. I hope that it's been very informative to understand the idea behind grinding teeth, how it affects the physical system, what you can do to help improve it, kind of like having an idea of the different emotional, spiritual aspects that can contribute to the development of that condition, and then really just understanding how to work with it. There's so much that goes into the fascial system. Fascia goes in and out of every single cell in the body. It does not compartmentalize the cells in terms of where it contributes its function and its purpose. So if it's a bone cell, it's there. If it's a muscle cell, it's there. If it's a nerve cell, anything, it's everywhere in the system. It is the soul system that is responsible for tension balance. So when you're looking at excessive tension models being present in that jaw area in terms of holding or grinding the teeth or like anchoring that jaw down, you're looking at the body's inability to self-regulate its excessive tension mechanisms that are created in a specific area. So it's very important to understand what it is, and likewise it's very important to understand where it comes from. So let me know your thoughts, and if there's any other topics that you want to know more information on, send them through. If you missed the first part of this discussion, go back on the video because it is very informative. And if you do struggle with grinding teeth, and you do struggle with locked jaw, and you do struggle with jaw tension and pain mechanisms that go into the ears and into the head space, work with fascia, work with the system. We can work with you distantly. We can work with you in person. It doesn't matter. The system is effective regardless of where you are. So if it is something that you want to connect with and you want to try a couple of sessions to work through, often the jaw from a grinding teeth perspective, if it is quite a chronic condition, will probably need quite a few sessions. It just depends how the body allows us to work with the expression. But it can definitely make a difference. So let me know your thoughts, and then have a great day. Cheers.